Hi and welcome to Brian's Run Pod, and it's me, your host, Brian. Well, today I'm interviewing someone I know through my local church. Come to think of it, I have interviewed quite a few people from my church. Anyhow, as is the way on Brian's Run Pod, I have split the podcast into two and started off by asking Paul, my guest, what was his experience of exercise in school. Now, what has become a common theme with these interviews, people's experience of physical exercise, or PE as we call it here in the UK, at school was not great. It isn't until later on that people have found running or exercise not so arduous and something that they can do very much in their spare time. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the podcast. So you're thinking about running, but not sure how to take the first step. My name's Brian Patterson, and I'm here to help. And welcome to Brian's Run Pod. Well, hello there, fellow runners, and welcome back to Brian's Run Pod, your go-to podcast for all things running related. Now, as part of the series of interviewing local runners in my local area, I have a wonderful guest on the show today. Now, in my previous episodes, I've interviewed my friend John and also the vicar's wife, plus others, and they all have incredible stories. And today's episode is all about an incredible journey of my good friend Paul Butler, a true running enthusiast, who's not only completed an outstanding 250 park runs, but has also conquered 100 crane park runs. Now, if you don't know what a park run is, well, according to their website, park run is a free community event where you can walk, jog, run, volunteer or spectate. Park run is 5 kilometres and takes place every Saturday morning. It was started by Paul Sinton Hewitt on the 2nd of October, 2004. So join me as we delve into Paul's inspiring journey into the world of running, from his humble beginnings to his remarkable achievements. Welcome to the podcast, Paul. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very well, Brian. Thank you. Yeah, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So, like I do with everyone, I kind of like to start right at the beginning. So what were you like at school in terms of, physical activity or running?
Well, I was quite a reluctant runner, to be honest with you. I started doing cross-country at school. I was at a grammar school, and pretty much every class involved a cross-country run, or every sporting afternoon at the start of it before you did football or rugby. And I was always sort of training somewhere at the back, in the back 5%. So, certainly the start was not particularly auspicious. And if I'm honest, I didn't particularly enjoy running at that point because I wasn't particularly fit. So, and I wasn't, blessed with a lot of the sporting ability of some of my peers either. So, yeah.
So was that sort of across all sports you did at school? Or were there any sports that you kind of excelled at?
Not really, to be honest with you. No, I enjoy playing football. Football's a big part of my life still now. Yeah. But very much an enthusiastic participant, but not particularly good. Yeah. When it started to change for me, running-wise, was when I was about 14, I think. There was a local fun run down in Torbay, and it was a 10K, and I trained for it. And at that point, I started to sort of see the impact of training and how you could improve just by putting effort in. Yeah. So I've always been, I think it's something that's always stayed with me since then, is when you start to put effort in and you see the results, that creates enthusiasm. And it was quite interesting, really, because then all of a sudden my cross-country time started to improve at school, and suddenly I wasn't the backmarker anymore. I was actually sort of starting to move up through the field. So
you can see that correlation of the kind of the effort that you put in.
Yes, yeah. So, and pretty much since then, I've run, a couple of gaps, maybe in my late teens, early 20s, and then one maybe sort of mid 20s. But I've run pretty consistently since then, right the way through my life. So, yeah.
So when you were uni, did you do quite a bit of running then, or was it kind of
so
were you sidetracked by?
I was sidetracked. Yeah, that was one of the kind of periods where probably running took a back seat.
Yeah,
I did join a running club actually when I first went to university in Winchester. So I joined Wessex Road Runners purely as a way of getting to know people. At that point, I was running pretty well, and I actually quite enjoyed it, but faded away really as I got into university life, and the student union took more of a hold. So yeah.
So after university, so you kind of went into working life. Was there, kind of a moment in time where you thought, oh, well, I must get back into getting fit or something like that, and then you may have discovered running then, or was it later on?
No, I'll tell you what really happened, what really inspired me was when I was about 22 and I was living in Norbiton. So I'd just finished at Kingston University. I'd done my postgraduate there, and I'd done a bit of running there because we were so handy for Richmond Park that I, used to use it as a way of getting out really at the weekends and just sort of taking the air. And, I love Richmond Park and really enjoyed that. And then just after I started work following my postgraduate, my dad phoned me up and said, Torquay United have got a place in the marathon for supporters. Are you interested?
Oh, right.
And this was in February, 8 weeks off the marathon. And I said, so I'd watched my dad the year before running it, and he was running in this year's marathon.
Right.
And I thought, do you know what? I'll give that a go.
Really?
And I didn't have a lot, I didn't have a lot on in my life at that time in terms of the fact I was working, but probably didn't have that many social connections in and around London. So I had quite a lot of time on my hands to train.
Yeah.
And so, so I ran that year's marathon with my dad. My dad ran it as well.
Yeah.
He was 51 at the time and I was, I think, 22. Right. Something like that. But we both won the same marathon the same year, which was something that will always stay with me, really. So, yeah, we've got photos of us both with our medals afterwards. And
and so were you running together, or did you kind of like split up and do your own race?
We ran our own races. So I ran actually from a separate start. So I ran in something called the Football League Challenge, which was run in its own right. And they started at the elite start. So it was quite bizarre really. I think it was the red start, and there was very few runners up there at all, and then we filtered into the main group of runners further down. It was a very interesting experience because I was in there with some fairly fast football club runners as well who were trained extensively for it, and it was the same the year following as well. We had this kind of almost like an elite, very small start, and off we went, and eventually filtered into the field somewhere sort of going down through Blackheath area. So
right. Was being your first marathon, I take it that was your first marathon, wasn't it?
The first one I did was 1996.
So was there a sort of a temptation of going too fast at the beginning and sort of getting carried away with the...
You do have that, but I think one of the things I knew was I had to be disciplined with it, and you have to run well within yourself. And the mistake that people do make with marathons is going off too quickly. But I knew I hadn't trained. I'd trained for 8 weeks, so I'd got up to quite a good mileage actually in 8 weeks. But I didn't have the sort of the longer build up, as it were, and. I actually ran quite sensibly, and I ran, I didn't run with a watch, but I ran watching the clock all the time and understanding where I was and, gauging, how many minute miles I was doing basically. So I knew I was well within where I should be. I actually, did pretty well really, considering.
So what was your time?
So I ran it in 3:39 that year. So
wow, that's really good.
Which I was very surprised by, because obviously I was kind of leaping into the unknown a little bit, really, in terms of not having done anywhere near that distance before. I'd done 10 miles and half marathon, but I'd never run seriously, any further than that. I think I did the breakfast run, which is 16 miles, as a part of my build-up, sort of 3 or 4 weeks prior. Which gave me a good, build, but nothing longer than that.
Okay,
So I did that one. But,
I remember doing that when it was the foot and mouth year or something like that.
No, it's a great one actually. So
it's a good one. Yeah. But so obviously you had some kind of innate, ability, because obviously 8 weeks out training for a marathon, but obviously you must have had some kind of endurance.
I think so, yeah.
Fitness there.
Yeah.
And you were obviously, because I hear stories, I interviewed someone, a coach, where their first marathon, they completely blew up. They didn't take enough gels with them, or they didn't pace themselves properly. You do hear kind of like horror stories with the first marathon. So obviously you were quite disciplined.
Yeah.
So mentally you must have been quite good, not to, sort of not being able to hold yourself back.
Yeah. And I done a lot of reading on the science of marathons and the importance of splitting the marathon into two, the first 20 miles and then the final 6.
Yeah.
And certainly, all my training had been around getting up to 20 miles. And I see a lot of people, when they're doing the marathon coverage, who've done sort of 15, 16 miles in training.
Yeah.
But that to me is not really preparing yourself for a marathon. You need to get up higher, and get.
It's all about up. Being on your feet, isn't it?
Yeah. So. Yeah. And getting time on feet. And actually, that was the way I did it. I did it time on feet, my training. Yeah. So I tended to focus more on, building up my long run by 10 minutes, another 20 minutes on top each week, just to get that Sunday long run really lengthened in terms of time on feet. And, I think I got to 3 laps of Richmond Park around that yellow path, and that was kind of the longest I'd done. But it was literally looking at, where I was against the watch really each week, and knowing when I got back in that I'd done 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 45 minutes, and building that way really. So, yeah.
And how did your dad do?
Oh, he did well, yeah. He was, I think, over 4 hours, but, considering he was 51 and, working full time, very long hours, he did really well. And he did 2 years when he was 50 and 51. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So maybe you had maybe you had his genes, as it were.
Yeah. No, he enjoyed it. I think he enjoyed it, but he ran I think that was really his last serious run, the marathon he did with me. And after that, he started to maybe get more into walking. And
yeah. All right. Yeah. And there were no ill effects afterwards. You weren't kind of like no injuries or anything like that.
No, not at all. I was very lucky, really. That first marathon really sort of inspired me, I think, to keep going with my running journey. And I really, really enjoyed running in and around Kingston and out around Richmond Park and along the river, doing those routes. Yeah. And it became, quite ingrained with me at that point, really. I really started to get out and about and do more and more running week to week. So, yeah.
I think for our international listeners, we live in sort of Twickenham, the suburbs of London, so we're kind of quite lucky here. So do you think, as one of the lessons of people who are sort of looking to do, let's say, marathons, it helps that to have sort of some running in sort of surroundings which can be quite sort of, I don't know, relaxing, as it were? Or?
Oh, hugely, yeah. I think in somewhere like Richmond Park, you've got the combination of the conditions and the environment that you're in. Yeah. And, getting up at, 7 o'clock on a Sunday and running in Richmond Park when it's frosty is an absolute pleasure in terms of what you see. The frost on the ground, the birds, just the colour of the sky, and the way that changes as you come through the seasons into spring. And that sort of period running in and around Easter as you're running, leading up to the marathon, is really quite a pleasure, because it's getting lighter and you're starting to see buds on the trees and, young animals and all the traditional sort of Easter type things. Yeah. So I think it really does help, if you've got somewhere. I think the other thing in Richmond Park is it's got good paths, so you can keep going. You're not worried about ruts and tripping over things. It's all fairly consistent. And you know where you are and you can just get the miles in there, So I think we are really lucky to have that combination of, we've got 3 big green areas here really. You've got Home Park, you've got Bushy Park, and you've got Richmond Park. But also you've got places like the Crane, which, probably anywhere else would think they were hugely lucky to have the Crane Valley to run up and down.
That's right. Yeah, you can go along the towpath, kind of thing.
Yeah, but we kind of almost take it for granted because we've got so many other big areas to run around on top of that. So, yeah.
And did you do any sort of speed training or anything like that?
Not for those two, really.
No.
I concentrated on time on feet. I mean, I did shorter runs.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any real focus on speed, no.
So there's no, or not speed, but, like tempo running, that kind of thing, or nothing like that?
No. I mean, I'd done, I think when I moved on further down the line and started to focus on things like half marathons, and that's when I did do more tempo running. You would concentrate on doing the last 15 minutes of the run slightly quicker, for example, to finish the run off, just to get that real feeling of pushing yourself a bit hard. So you might run an hour and a quarter, and the last quarter of an hour was pushing,
Yeah.
And that was more, I suppose, the time when I started to focus a bit more on speed. And the other time, where I did a lot of speed training was a bit later on. So when I joined the Stragglers in Kingston, they had quite a structured speed training program, and they had a couple of things where you could actually work to focus on, for example, doing a 10K. Yeah. And within that, you'd have hills and speed training sets that you do together on a Tuesday night. And that was really good, actually. And that was later on, that was in my 30s, but that was when I really sort of noticed the impact of running different ways,
yes,
as part of an overall strategy, and how that could really impact your speed as a runner.
Yeah. So it's not just about the mileage, it's kind of more about the intensity that can be as beneficial.
Yeah. Particularly, I think, for 10Ks and those sorts of distances where you haven't got to think about time on feet. I think really mixing things up, does really impact. So, yeah.
And also the fact that you may be, I don't know, short on time. And I know we go to the same gym, but I know sometimes a lot of people hate the treadmill, but just doing, let's say, maybe an interval session on the treadmill kind of makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. No, that's right.
And also it kind of helps with, I mean, not sort of going off on a tangent or whatever, but you kind of get an idea as to your pace.
Yes.
Your pace should be, that kind of thing. So, you can either do, 400 meter sprints, or you could do a 1500 meter tempo run, that kind of thing. That kind of thing.
We used to run on a Tuesday night out on Riverside Drive, which is the other side of Teddington Lock. Yeah. And we used to meet at the lock end, and we used to do, intervals of, you do 1 minute out, 1 minute back, and it would almost be a handicap system where you were expected to get back to where you'd started. So you'd do 1 minute out, you'd stop, wait, you'd all wait together.
Yeah.
And then wherever you'd finished, you'd start from to get back in again to where you'd started from. So those who'd gone out slightly quicker had to catch the people who they'd gone further than on the way back in, if that makes sense. So that created a sort of element of competition going back in.
Yeah.
And it was out and back, and you do triangles. You might do 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, or you might do a different set of slightly longer, 4 minute out, 4 minute back. And the whole thing was about building your ability to recover, basically. Yeah. So, yeah.
So do you think, I mean, touching on that, and I think it's something I've talked about in the past, is to help motivate you to kind of get out the door, is by going somewhere to a running club like the Stragglers, or to a local running club where it's not just about running, but it's the community, and you're meeting other people and you're making those connections.
Yeah, I mean, I've stopped going to the Stragglers now, but I went through, a period where it was a really big part of my life, and I'd see the same group of people on a Tuesday night, then we'd go on a Thursday night, which was the main club night, and you'd go and you'd sit and have a pint afterwards, and they'd do the club announcements. Yeah. There might be some awards. They'd run a monthly handicap race as well, where the whole club came together and ran on a handicap basis out of the Hawker Centre. They've moved now over to Bushy Park, but the principle of that, again, was about including everybody. And then you'd see the same group again at Bushy Park on a Saturday doing the park run or at a race event, and you started to build quite a nice social network from that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you touched on the park run. So when did you start doing the park run?
So I started back in 2005. So it wasn't that long after Paul had started running it in Bushy Park.
Yeah.
And it was the Bushy Park time trial at that point.
Yeah.
And I think I responded, or I'd seen it advertised in the Stragglers magazine, because Paul was a member of Ran the Harriers, which is one of the competitive clubs to Stragglers, or one of the other clubs in the area. But he was also a member at Stragglers as well. So I knew quite a lot of people that were going, and I went along. And the first one I ran, there was about 40 of us there. And I think it started with 13. So it hadn't really built that much on from where it started from in terms of numbers. And it's quite funny to look back at that now and think, that I'd run a park run as it is now with 40 other people, when, that event now gets between 1,400 and 1,600 runners pretty much every week, unless it's tipping it down with rain. So
yes, I know.
It's quite amazing in terms of the scale from, where it started to where it is now. But again, that was, I think, doing those early Saturdays was part of my, the period where I really did become almost addicted to running, because, you started to see your time come down, and it was as a result of what I touched on earlier on in the conversation, what you put in, you get back out.
Yeah. And
I was doing more and more running and seeing my times come down, very gradually. And I was running against my peers. Although it's meant to be quite an informal event, there was always that kind of edge of competition where you knew,
of course, that's right,
who else was running and what they ran at. And, invariably you'd have the same people finishing down the straight down Chestnut Avenue, because the route was different then. You'd run back down Chestnut Avenue to finish almost. And you'd be following people down Chestnut Avenue, who you knew might have finished 10 seconds ahead of you last week, and you'd be desperately trying to get tighter to them.
So where it starts now, which is at the car park.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the original.
Well, the original start was actually over there, but it was in a different area pointing out. So it sort of used to head out around that end of the park and do a loop round past the playground and then out around the track almost. So it's a completely different route now. It's what they call the butterfly route, which seems to take more people and is probably better thought out in terms of just taking some of the weight off some of the tracks, really. So, yeah.
Because where it is now, it's kind of like, it's like that stampede.
Yeah.
Going all the way to the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, I think that's one of the difficult things actually for me, because I take the children, and they're not huge fans of that stampede at the beginning. And I think, when you've got children who are maybe a bit overwhelmed by that sort of size and scale, it can be difficult. So, but it is it is not a victim, that's wrong, but it is a very successful event and very popular, and people now come from all around the world to run it. So,
And that's a wrap for another exhilarating episode of Brian's Run Pod. Thanks for tuning in, folks. As always, we've got your back with all things running, and next week, get ready for some awesome beginner hints and tips to kickstart your running journey. Oh, and before we sign off, exciting news. We're now available on YouTube, so whether you're pounding the pavement or chilling at home, you can catch us there too. Hey, if you want to keep up with the latest updates, behind-the-scenes fun, and even some exclusive content, make sure to follow me on social media. You can find me on Twitter, or should I say X, at Brian's Run Pod. We've also just launched a shiny new Facebook page. Simply search for Brian's Run Pod and give us a like. And don't forget to hop on over to Instagram, where you can catch all our visual adventures at Brian's Run Pod. For those of you who love diving deep into the episodes, head over to our website, www.briansrunpod.co.uk, and there you'll find detailed show notes, handy chapter markers, make it too easy to navigate through our favourite discussions. Please leave a review, as it will always help others find this podcast. Music is by Happy Days by Stock Audio, not forgetting artwork by Alice Patterson. Till next week, thanks again for listening.